over the years, our society has developed this very romanticized idea of what marriage is. We have romantic films, we have novels, songs, and they all sell us this overly fantasized image of what really happens when two people decide to get married. These images we've been gathering and accepting for over the years have led us, or have led many of us, to write a long list of requirements and expectations we expect the other person to meet. Right there, we start running into some problems because the truth is that most people get married for very selfish reasons. We look for a partner that is, going to make us happy, but rarely do we ask ourselves or do we stop and consider if we are the type of person that's going to make our partner happy. The whole situation gets very interesting when, after the honeymoon period and the fun part is over, then the reality of life sets in, and it is no longer softened by the dopamine and serotonin that made us feel in love at the beginning of the relationship. To better understand this situation, we have to look at the root of that problem, or the root of the situation. And here's the thing. If we go back to the beginning and we read Genesis chapter 1, verse 31, we see that when God saw everything that he had made, it was very good. When Adam and Eve got married, Adam gave a little speech, and in that speech he called Eve bones of my bones and flesh of my flesh. Doesn't get any closer than that. And then he said, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother, and the two shall become, and join his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Clearly, Adam was very happy to be with Eve, to the point that he called her bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, and we'll become one flesh, etc. He called her bone of my bones. It's not very romantic, but he tried. But when you read Genesis chapter 3, you find that his attitude changed completely. After they both ate from the tree of good and evil, and they became infected with the virus of sin, you can clearly see that their relationship got fractured, that they grew apart from each other, that they no longer were bones on my bones. When God asked them what happened, Adam said, the woman you gave me. And then when you compare that to what he said before, she was no longer bone of my bones. She was now the woman God gave him. Now, Eve knew that she had messed up or she made a mistake when she gave Adam of the fruit. So she blamed the serpent. It becomes very curious and very obvious how Adam and Eve, the moment they got separated from God, they grew apart. It's as if God provided something or did something to their relationship that made them feel so together that they literally called each other bone of my bones and one flesh. The question is then, what did God provide? To answer that question, we first need to understand two key principles. And the very first one is this: no one can give you what they don't have. And number two, the more you look at someone, the more you become like that person. In the case of God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, we find that 1 John chapter 4 verse 8 says that God is love. And Jesus, though he was rich, yet for our sakes he became poor, so that through his poverty we might become rich. That's in 2 Corinthians chapter 8 verse 9. Then you read Galatians chapter 5 verse 22, and you find that the very first fruit of the Spirit is love. When Adam and Eve were close to God, they were like God, who is love. The main reason why most marriages fail is because they don't have the ingredients necessary to develop a successful relationship. Having a close relationship with God allows the Holy Spirit to produce in our hearts and to produce in our minds the fruits of the Spirit, which are love, joy, peace, long suffering, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self control. These attributes are exactly what a relationship needs to be successful. And that applies to your relationship with yourself, with your family, and clearly with your spouse. Being away from God has deprived marriages of the very ingredients needed to be successful. Adam and Eve grew apart when they ate from the tree which they thought was going to make them happy. They thought that by getting away from God, they were going to find something that was going to, make their lives better, but that clearly didn't work. That separation only brought them pain and suffering. They were hoping to avoid it, but that's what they got. Look, without God, human nature is arrogant and selfish. That's just the truth. Without God, it is impossible for us to act anything but arrogant and selfish. It's in our DNA. It doesn't matter how much therapy you go to, it doesn't matter how much effort you put into a relationship and you try your bestest to make it work. The truth is that without God, those efforts are going to feel like a chore. Like the relationship is this uphill battle that it just never ends. Or like you're just going through life getting stabbed by this rusty nail that just gets deeper every day. And it's kind of sad when you see people who try to make it with their own efforts and with their own strength, and in the end they just have this look of defeat, that life just beat them so hard that they just give up. Here's the thing. To change the reality we live in, it's necessary to change what we're doing, because clearly it ain't working. When you get closer to God and you decide to follow His principles, you decide to accept the changes brought about by the Holy Spirit, then you begin to turn, or God will turn your selfishness into real love. In conclusion, marriages are failing because couples are separated from God, who is the only supplier of the ingredients needed to have a successful marriage.